Good morning. It's wonderful to see a full house, but of course, can you expect anything else for Geetanjali Shree? Here we are. And the book, Our City, that year is one of the most, I mean, it's a book that will never leave you. It's a book that haunts you. It's a book that in many ways is fiction, but is really very much about the times we live in. It's for anybody who's ever grappled with questions of polarization. It's about keeping hope alive. It's really quite wonderful. It came out in 1998, G? It came out in 1998. And in many ways, the book talks about the time we're living in right now. So I think, of course, it was inspired from what happened in 1992. But you take it much further and talk about the times we live in right now. So can you really talk about when you started writing it? I think when we spoke, you said it came out in 1998, but you had started writing it before?
Well, hello everyone. First of all, let me say very briefly that it's lovely to be back at JLF. I mean, JLF has created an extended family, and I'm very thrilled and proud to be part of it, and happy that they ask me to return every other year. Thanks to them, and thank you, JLF, and it's great to be talking to someone so intelligent and committed as Mandira. For a writer to present her work in a short time, I think is always something which doesn't come that easy, at least not to me. So I'll try nonetheless. Now you say, it did come out, I think it came out in 98, but I'm a slow writer. I write slowly, I'm not in a hurry. And I think I'd started already in the early 90s. And you speak of 92. What happened in 92? I can't remember the exact thing.
92 was the Babri Masjid.
Yeah, okay. So you speak of that, but actually I started well before that. Because what I was dealing with was the larger phenomenon, in which events like the Babri Masjid and other events crept in and would creep in. But I was speaking of a larger phenomenon. And when you do that, you're actually talking of a longer span of time. So an atmosphere, a psyche, a cracking up of society, which was happening for me very disturbingly as a changed scenario from my childhood to my adulthood. And I was obsessed, like many others, with why and how was this happening. And that is what got me started on writing this novel.
Because it is, but what we were talking about earlier was that in a way it is your most political novel. It's branded as one of your most political novels. And you said all the other novels sort of came to you organically, right? But this was something that you wrote with
I don't know if I used the word political. I certainly used the word didactic, I remember.
Didactic, yeah.
I said that this is my most didactic novel to date. It's political or overtly political because this theme is recognized, large and wide as a political theme.
Yeah.
I indeed think that all my other novels are also political. They're dealing with relationships which need to be rearranged, changed, and questioned and doubted. And that is already a political act. So I don't really think that those are not political and this is very political. It's just that we do recognize this theme as very political. But what I was speaking of was didactic. It was while I allow myself to be quite serendipitous in my other novels, in this particular one, I started out with a very clear worry
Yeah.
about the misinformation and the rumors and the prejudices that I saw myself surrounded by, and quite shockingly found that these prejudices were there even in the sections we considered very literate and liberal and enlightened.
Yeah.
And I think it was that which gave me a didactic agenda like I didn't have in other novels, that I do want to expose, if possible, or puncture these prejudices through the writing.
So I'm just going to briefly introduce the characters, and then I'm going to ask you to read. So the novel really happens between 4 characters. There is Shruti, who is a writer. There is Hanif. There is Sharat. And they're all friends. And then there is my favorite character, who is Dadu. I think he's the character with hope. He's an older man. They live with him. Shruti and Hanif live above him in his house. And he's the one who's seen partition, he's seen violence, and he sort of still holds on to humanity. At the beginning of the novel, you know what's going to happen to him, but yet, in some ways, you're sort of hoping it doesn't. Those are the characters, and you sort of enter the intimate world through conversations, through all the conversations that happen, and you're sort of, in a way, watching them. And of course, there's also a narrator who writes. In many ways, the book spoke to me because Shruti is a writer. It's very much a question of all journalists and writers as to how you talk about polarization. How do you talk when there is so much hate? She's paralyzed, and all that comes out of her are love stories. So I'm sort of just giving you a gist of what the novel is, but I'm going to ask Geetanjali Shree to please read a little bit. Would you want to read right now?
Okay. All that comes out of her are love stories, but there's also somewhere deep desire to protect love stories.
Yeah.
If possible, return to the world of love stories.
Yeah.
And I think her trauma is that love story seems to be so out of sync with the terrible things that are happening around. So it's like the possibility of a life of love and beauty is being taken away by things that are happening around, and forcing all of us to engage just with that.
Yeah.
I think that's what her paralysis reflects.
And I think there is, you wrote, I mean, at least there is this beautiful line where you say there was nothing of beauty, possible in that year. And then there is this one scene where Hanif and Sharad are going from a shortcut, and there is a bridge, which is where lovers used to meet, couples used to meet, and that bridge is bereft at that time, it's empty. It's sort of, this hate is taking away everything, and it's sort of taking away everything that is beautiful in that year. So could you?
Yeah. So I'm just going to read out the beginning from the book that I have written in Hindi. Our City that year has been translated wonderfully by Daisy Rockwell. This is the book which I wrote and started somewhere in the 90s, and it came out in the late 90s. And it's called Hamara Shahar Us Baras. So I'll just read the first 2 pages so that you have some idea of how I've got into the narrative. यही जगह है हमारा शहर, घबराकर जिस शहर में निकल गए थे वे 3 कि अपराध और अपराधी, घायल और मुर्दे सबको निकाल लाएंगे, साफ साफ देख लेंगे और जैसा साफ देख लेंगे वैसा ही साफ दिखा देंगे। शरद, श्रुति और हनीफ जिन्होंने ठान लिया था कि लिखेंगे कि इस वक्त चुप नहीं रहा जा सकता, सब कुछ खोल कर रख देना है, कि जो हवा चल रही है वो हवा नहीं बवंडर है जो हमें कहीं उखाड़ ना दे। बारिश हो रही है, ट्रेन से उतरकर श्रुति प्लेटफॉर्म पर खड़ी है, एक थरथराहट भरी बेचैनी उसके पैरों के नीचे से गुजरकर ट्रेन के साथ साथ निकल जाती है। लोग गिरते पड़ते भीगते बाहर को सवारियां ढूंढने दौड़ गए हैं। शहर के गाय और कुत्ते पानी टपकाते प्लेटफॉर्म पर सुस्ताने चले आए हैं। पानी पटरियों की तरफ रुख करके बह रहा है, वीराना है। उस बरस एक बार सड़कों पर ऐसी ही नदियां बहने लगी थीं, पर वो बारिश नहीं थी, टंकियों का पानी था जो मोहल्लों के मोहल्लों ने जहर के डर से खोल कर बहा दिया था। शरद दूर से उसे पहचान कर बढ़ा। वो खड़ी रही, अकेली, इंतज़ार करती। दोनों आमने सामने आ गए हैं। उनके चेहरे उनके शब्दों में उलझकर अजीब बंधी जकड़ी चुप्पी पैदा कर रहे हैं। वे संभले कदमों से बाहर आ गए। तीनों समझते थे कि सब कुछ वहीं बाहर था जो हमें इतना भयभीत और व्याकुल कर रहा था। उन्हीं का डर था जो मुझ में भी भर गया था। मैं घबराने लगी। वे लिखने की कोशिश करते और बीच में छोड़ देते, अपने लिखे को खोखला पाते और कहते सब रटी रटाई बातें हैं जिनको लिखने से कुछ नहीं होगा, क्योंकि वे हर तरफ नकारी जा रही हैं, सरकारी नारों की तरह बेमतलब हो चुकी हैं। तब मुझे लगा था कि कुछ तो करना ही पड़ेगा, कैसे भी हो लिखना तो पड़ेगा, चाहे समझें या ना समझें। और वे न सही जिनमें से एक पेशेवर लेखिका थी और दो बुद्धिजीवी, तो मैं ही सही जो बस नकल करता हो सकती थी। उस वक्त में कुछ ऐसा नहीं था कि साफ दो टूक बात कही जाए, तभी मैं लिख सकी, जिसे न दो टूक कहने का तजुर्बा था न हट। नकल उतारने को अगर लिखना कहें तो मैं बस वही कर रही थी, वही कर सकती थी। इनके पीछे पीछे रहकर जो टुकड़े उठाए उठा लूँ, जो जहाँ मेरी नज़र में पड़ जाए। मेरी नज़र के आगे वही घर है, वही फाटक, वही लेटर बॉक्स। वहाँ एक मधुमालती की लतर हुआ करती थी, जिसके नीचे गुलाबी मसूड़ों पर सफ़ेद दांतों की कतार देखकर अजीब मतली सी आई थी, और मेरा कलम मेरे हाथ से छूटकर उसी के पास जा छिटका था। बाद में मैंने सोचा भी कि क्यों नहीं उन्हें देखकर मुझे मधुमालती के गुलाबी और सफ़ेद फूल याद आए। उल्टे मधुमालती के फूलों को देखकर हमेशा वही गुलाबी मसूड़े और सफ़ेद दांत याद आ जाते और उपकाई सी लगती। ना ही उन्हें देखकर वो सुंदर सेहतपूर्ण हंसी याद आई जो दद्दू के पूरे चेहरे को खिला देती थी। वो धूल में पड़े हंसी की सारी सुंदरता को बेआबरू करते एक घिनौना आकार भर हो गए, चेहरे की सारी शख्सियत को भुलाते, उस इंसान के सारे अस्तित्व को गायब करते। दद्दू कहते थे कि पहचान को गाढ़ी लकीरों से आकार बनाकर किसी टुकड़े में घुसेड़ोगे तो पहचान नहीं, बेकार बेजान कटआउट रह जाएगा। कि पहचान तो बाहर फूटती और फैलती और खुले में विचरती, हर चीज़ से लिपटती घुलती रोशनी है, जिसे किसी टुकड़े में बंद करोगे कि विशुद्ध अस्तित्व बनेगा तो बस बुझ जाएगी और मरा हुआ आकार रह जाएगा, मांस का घिनौना लोथ। मगर मैं तो टुकड़े ही उठाती रही। वक्त नहीं था, सलाहियत की छोड़िए, कि बीच के हिस्से भरूं, जोड़ती कड़ियाँ तलाशूं। किसी भी चीज़ को इत्मीनान से करने का वक्त नहीं था। बस डरते डरते जल्दी जल्दी इनकी कॉपी करती गई, चाहे इधर का उधर लिखा जाए, गैर ज़रूरी कलम में खिंचाए, यहाँ का टुकड़ा वहाँ चस्पा कर जाऊँ। जब जीवन ही कोलाज बन गया था, जिसमें बम के विस्फोट से जैसे कतरे उछलते हैं और इस जगह से उस जगह जा चिपकते हैं, निहायत बेतुकी आकृतियाँ गढ़ते, तो अधूरे बिखरे टूटे से आखिर बचाव था ही कहाँ। अब लाशों के खेत में गोभी की फसल सुने हो कभी? तो सुन लो, थी हमारे शहर में उस बरस। और सुने हो कभी कि ऐसी सफ़ेद तरोताज़ा गठे जिस्म वाली गोभी कौड़ियों के दाम भी न बिके? सो भी हमारे ही शहर की बात, उसी बरस की बात। ऐसी ही बातें जिनका न सिर न पैर और मेरे बस का नहीं था कि टुकड़ों को जोड़ जाड़ कर असल सूरत दिखाऊं। शुरू से ही मैं नकल करता रही हूँ। शुरू से कि नहीं पता नहीं, क्योंकि ये किसी को नहीं पता था कि शुरू कहाँ है। पर वहाँ से जहाँ से उनकी घबराहट से डर कर मैंने झपट कर कागज़ खींचा, कलम खोला और धूल धुएं के मौसम में जुट गई कि तुम नहीं तो मैं ही लिखती हूँ, यानी तुम्हारी ही कॉपी करती हूँ। क्योंकि लिखना तो था ही उस बरस और शहर के बारे में, किसी न किसी को तो गवाह बनना था। और क्या मालूम ना समझ की अनर्गल वाणी में सार हो, और क्या पता उस बरस के बाद बरस और भी हों. शुक्रिया.
Thank you. That lays it out. But I wanted to ask you, from that, this aspect of bearing witness, of writing, of having a voice. Dadu tells Shruti at some point of time, continue writing the love stories that you had, because your voice, when you scream, this is not your voice. Your voice is more sober. Talk, so writing will reflect that voice. And I wanted to ask you, how do writers keep alive this voice? How do you keep that voice alive?
I think not just writers, I think every human being is trying to keep their voice alive, and that is what their whole struggle and endeavor in their life is. A writer, the very fact that a writer will sit down and spend so many hours grappling with something means that desire is completely intense and sincere. And of course, it is a search and it is a struggle, and a writer is trying to find that. But if she did not have that hope, she did not have that faith in that possibility, she would not carry on. So the very fact that she's trying with however much despair that may creep into the tone is the fact makes that search valid and keeps, if you will, that voice alive. That is what I would say.
So, you talk about the division between Hindu and Muslim, right? And at some point of time, I think you say, Shruti says that, sometimes we were Hindu, sometimes we were Hindu, or sometimes Muslim, and sometimes you made us Hindu or Muslim, right? Can, the idea of this polarization that we somehow, let's say, if you look at it in terms of the media, it sort of comes to a year, right? We sort of think of it as that year where we trace it to. But you've been writing since 1990, where you say that you felt that there was a change. The mahal had changed in a way. People were being divided according to religion. My question really is that, do you, and I'm going to read out what Kefi Azmi wrote at that point of time, and it's this thing where he said that बस्ती में अपनी हिंदू मुसलमान जो बस गए, इंसान की शक्ल देखने को हम तरस गए. So there's this grappling of the division, and I wanted to ask you, as a writer, the non-English writers engage with this for a very, very long time. There is, in popular culture, of course, if you look at it at that point of time, we sort of, how did we ignore this silent sort of wave? And can you talk about engaging with communalism in a way? And how did you actually feel it within your own personal life? Because in some ways, the book is really about intimacy and how the hate outside changes the intimate relationships between these three people.
आपने तो एक हॉले में न जाने कितनी चीज़ें पूछ
ली, I know.
तो मैं कोशिश करूँगी, but I'm not sure I can bring all those together. So I'm also going to meander and wander a little bit. First of all, polarization, yes. Divisions, yes. Hatred between communities, growing breakdown of communication lines and possibilities between communities. That is certainly a theme of the work. But I think there are larger polarizations also at work.
Yeah.
So it's not just simple, this side where everything is fine and that side where everything is wrong. So it's actually a much more fluid situation, a much more mixed problem that the book is trying to address. Identity politics is playing a huge big role in today's world, and not just today. It had started already yesterday. It was already there during the national movement, and it's just grown further and further. Identity has become one big thing, and identity. When we get into identity politics, one of the biggest drawbacks, so one of the biggest pitfalls there is that it straitjackets
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah.
And it fits them into neat definitions, and none of us fit those
Yeah.
definitions. Life is much more open.
Yeah. And messy.
And I want to, I mean, there's a word that is now being associated a lot with me after Tomb of Sand, after Ret Samadhi, which is what Tomb of Sand is in the original, that is borders. So everything, I mean, actually, there are no such watertight borders.
Yeah.
Not even in our identities. And it is that which has kept a lot of exchange of all kinds possible between peoples, and that is what has enriched cultures and all of us. I think that is what we are trying to somehow, save, preserve. And I think that is what is under threat when identity politics becomes the
larger
mover and shaker.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And I think you spoke of, so more and more we are in a world where people are being, narrowly defined as you are this and you are that.
Yeah.
And you are just this and that. We are not, even within us, we are not one single person or one single identity. So that's one thing. But the other is, I think, about othering itself.
Yes.
I think there's some kind of easy comfort to be drawn from the fact of all the evil and all the problems being with the other side.
Yeah.
And we on this side can be self-righteous and arrogant and resolved.
Yeah.
I think the book, I got going with the book because I was disturbed by this phenomenon of thinking that we are not doing anything.
Yeah.
Who's we? We with our great ideals of dignity for all, equality for all, freedom for all, etc. What is it that we were doing wrong, which was making us seem so weak and ineffectual? What was it that we seem to be losing complete control, complete grip, complete sort of agency in the world we were living in? And I think it was that. I mean, it is the urgency to look not just at the one we've made the other, but to look inwards and also at yourself and see where have we gone wrong and what is it that we need to do. So there are no answers, but there's an important question that plagues the characters of the book and the narrator who's writing those down. Tell me if there's something else which...
So this idea of the other, right, where you view somebody, where in some ways, and this was, I mean, when you wrote the book, this was also a time, and you don't talk about social media, for example. I mean, of course, the book is written in written much before that, where that adds to the environment in your city, My question really is, there is this very powerful scene where Sharad and Hanif, who are friends, are sitting, and Hanif is wearing a Pathani suit. And Sharad looks at him and turns around and says, "Oh, you haven't worn that for a while." And he said, "But I always wear it, but it's now you're looking at me in a different way." My question is that how do you, in this space where there is othering, where there is this, where identity politics is the dominant noise in a way, it's difficult to drown out. It's the soundtrack that is very much part of our today, very much like the soundtrack we can hear right now. How do you, the idea of reflection, the idea of that in intimate space, a space of friendship where every conversation then becomes loaded, where jokes cease to be funny, where you can count on loyalty, but not necessarily of being seen, which is what you want, of empathy or this. You navigate this sort of minefield in a way. My question is, do you think there is a way to sort of protect us? Do you think that there is, or do you think in some ways that we're all doomed to be like these characters? The only person who seems to be completely protected from it, who's lived the longest, who finds joy in small places. That is Daddu. So how do we sort of protect ourselves, and or are we doomed?
Well, first of all, I'm not no seer who's going to tell you.
Well, the book.
Well, no. I think what a writer does is to voice fears and anxieties and emotions which may come to her as an individual, but nobody is just an individual. So I'm willy-nilly expressing the same emotions which a lot of people
People
are
have, yeah.
feeling. So I belong to a community, even as I'm an individual. So what I'm doing is, I'm expressing those anxieties. I think that is the first step.
Yeah.
You ask me, that is the first step, whether of hope, whether of solution, whether of any, positive direction being found. To recognize the problem,
Yeah.
to recognize what's gone hazy, what's confounding us, and to realize that things are not, the answers we've given are not good enough.
Yeah.
They have not resolved anything. That is the beginning. So if you ask me, is there, do you see yourselves a doom? No. I think while we ask these questions, and not only others are doing that too, while we are asking these questions, while we are facing these problems, I think there is hope. We are not doomed. Then you speak of someone like Daddu. Now I'm mixing up our conversation just now and conversations
earlier.
we've had
Earlier.
off the stage.
Yes.
But you say that, Daddu might be representing some, a gone generation which is now dead and gone.
Yeah.
So I don't like to believe that's entirely true. I think there are Daddus around us even today.
Yeah.
And in small ways, in big ways, and some way or the other, you and I also have, Daddus inspiring
Yeah.
us and continuing in us. So while we are there, how can I even accept? And this is not Kora Adarshwad nahi hai. It's not just very naive idealism that while we are there is hope. I think indeed while we are there is hope. Because we are recognizing things, we are grappling with it, we are engaging with it, and we are trying to open those spaces where these things have to be expressed.
Yeah.
So Daddu represents a whole edifice which we feel has come down.
Yeah.
The composite culture of this country.
Yeah.
But I think there's so many of us, we represent precisely that composite culture.
Composite culture.
Yeah.
But I think it's also about memory, and I think it is about tolerance. I think in some ways, if you've lived longer, and I don't necessarily mean age, some people have that ability to do it, where and he says, Daddu says to her when when Shruti comes across a pamphlet which is talking about, division and being, that it's time for us to stand up and speak this thing. Everybody else should go to Pakistan. And he says, this is not the first time it's happened, right? It happened before too. So there is a memory of repair in a way. So, so do you think that still exists, and how do you sort of go back to that space? Is it poetry? Is it music? Because there's a lot of that too. How do you find ways to repair and sort of be able to do this?
Yeah, as of now, I think there is enough. It is not a dead and gone phenomenon at all that we are together and doing things together and learning from each other and exchanging with each other, which is not about denying that certain other things are happening. There is sharpening of divisions, a breakdown of dialogue, and there is resort to violence. There is not just, the state that we have to think about. There's also civil society which has, taken over and has started telling you what to do and what not to do. And these are things which we have to deal with more and more. But I do not think that the other voice, the voice we feel is the one which is going to, which is the humane voice,
Yeah.
which is the voice which is pushing for dialogue, communication. If there is misunderstanding, let's talk about it. If there is your side and my side, let's talk about it. Rather than, pick up a stone and hurl it at the other and just shut the other up. So I think that is still there. So, and those are the forums that have to be furthered.
Yeah.
And that is where certainly poetry, literature come in very, very useful. And I think writers will write in amenable circumstances, in congenial atmospheres, and they'll find strategies to write and speak in non-congenial atmospheres as well. And this is something which has been happening again for a long time.
Yeah.
In fact, pre-independence, the word is always potentially feared. So it was feared pre-independence as well. And at some point, I don't know the exact history of it, but at some point, perhaps it was in the 19th century, that the British instituted I think it was called the Vernacular Press Act.
Yes.
To come down on what's being written and what's not. And they realized that it was much more pragmatic to let people write what they will. And they actually took it away. So they repealed the act. Post-independence, people have been, in some ways, quite tough on things that have been written. And there have been cases on, Manto, Premchand, etc., pre-independence, but post-independence also, sometimes obscenity charge, sometimes some other charge.
Chuktai.
Yeah, Ismat Chuktai. So it's not something which is happening just today. It's unfortunately seems to be sharpening today.
Yeah.
Not just here, further across the globe as well. So there's something which is worrying, something which needs to be understood. But I really like to think that there is hope still around. I've just come back from Punjab. And, people were telling me that, partition time, things were very terrible there. Since partition, they said, we've not had any riots in the Punjab. And in my own childhood, again, there are partition memories which are completely traumatic, and, people in North India are full of those stories, and a lot of them carry all that pain and all that, grief inside them, the trauma inside them. But I've known in my own childhood a completely, alongside these traumas, and easy and constant relation between the two communities, Hindus and Muslims in this case. And it seems to be that that's breaking down today. And we all have to fight, to get that in order. But here I'll say something which I don't know if you've asked, but I'd really like to say it. To expect from literature the kind of activism that journalism does or the activists do is actually going to destroy literature, if you will.
Yeah, because
literature is not rarely about direct confrontation. That's not the tone it adopts to take the conversation forward. Literature is really about getting into a place of quiet, getting into a place where you can reflect. So it's about moving back 2 steps. Rather than, going into the problem, into the opponent, so to speak. It's about stepping back a little and looking in quiet and trying to figure it out in quiet. And that is why literature needs that much more time sometimes. And that is why sometimes I feel I'm out of sync with the current world, because I'm still, grappling with something which is, much more in the air while something is happening right here. And it's that balance and that tightrope walk, that while I'm doing that, I should not lose touch with what's happening currently. So it's that kind of balance that I'm always trying to find, and that becomes the challenge, and that becomes sometimes also the strength, gives me the energy, but that also becomes the thing which is the huge pressure on me, because I need to step back, look quietly, even turn my glance inwards and look quietly. And today's world and time does not give me that space
No.
and time easily, and that's my huge tension. Round and round and round, sorry.
No, but I think that that's important too. I think in some ways the book also does this. You sort of start off somewhere else and you go on to this thing, and conversations are very much like that. And you sort of, the book is, you're sort of in the middle of a conversation and you sort of pick up. And so my question is, literature and activism, right? I was telling you that Abraham Verghese had basically said that, had said in some ways that, he said that, and I'm going to paraphrase, where he said that fiction is the great lie that tells the truth about how the world lives, okay? So my question really is that, while literature isn't and cannot take the space of activism, in many ways, writers are now taking up, are speaking truth much more than than the censorship, where if there is self-censorship, and they are sort of pointing out the truth much more, and we're looking at writers to sort of use their conscience much more. My question really is that, do you see how does that work, in the sense that, do you think fiction allows you, even though it may not be activism, but it allows you that stepping back from saying that this is not real, allows you a little more freedom, whereas journalism is sort of presenting the truth as it is, or supposed to? Do you think it gives you, in some way, a cushion and a buffer, and that's why everybody's turning to literature?
I don't know if I would use the word buffer, but I think literature is certainly, wanting that space of reflection and asking for that space of reflection for everybody. Don't be in a... I think what's happened today is that we've got very, very easy truths.
Yeah.
We've got easy truths, we've got everything worked out. And I think that is precisely the problem. I think literature is saying, please slow down and please think. Please rethink.
Yeah.
Please rethink some of your sureties. I think we are... the malady today is certitude.
Yeah.
And on all sides, not
I
only
agree.
the side which we consider other to us,
Yeah.
or the opposite side. I think on our side also, there's too much certitude which we need to rethink.
Yeah.
I mean, does it work? If it hasn't worked, what is it? Is there something wrong with it? Is there something insensitive in it? Or what is it? So we do need to puncture our certitudes.
Yeah.
Very much. So that is important, and I think literature is a plea for that. And while you were talking, I was just thinking, that the narrator here decides. The narrator is not all-knowing.
Yeah. Yeah.
She can be in many places. She can be in any place at any time.
Yeah.
She can hear, she sees, and she writes it down. But she's not, what's the word? Omniscient.
Yeah.
She doesn't know everything.
Yeah.
So she also writes down what she considers what might be irrelevant and unimportant.
Yeah.
Because who knows, maybe it'll add up. And I think that is what a writer realizes, or life teaches us, that things which look like they may be going nowhere can also actually be signs in life. They
Yeah.
also become signs in life, and they add up to giving you a picture of the reality. Yeah.
The other question I wanted to ask you was that, Daddu, for example, is hope, but at some point of time in the book, he also talks about partition, right? And the kind of violence that everybody faced. And, there's this great, easy comparison of the partition and the Holocaust, in the sense where everybody says it's exactly like, there is this simple comparison that people make, but it's actually not. Because in the Holocaust, the bad guys are, you know who the bad guys are, right? There's surety in that, there's certitude in that. Whereas in partition, the victim is also sometimes the perpetrator. And I wanted to ask you about that, this idea of victim and perpetrator, which is carried on from partition, and now this certitude that we talk about, where we sort of are certain we are victims, or we are certain that people are perpetrators, and how do you sort of place that into the context of the book?
Well, when I wanted to write this book, I knew I wanted to write this book. I knew I wanted to write with this problem of a certain divisive, prejudiced atmosphere coming into circles, which seemed very enlightened, and that upset me very much. And I wanted to write the book. But I also felt, right from the start, quite paralyzed, quite handicapped, because I felt that more or less everything has been said about this topic and related topics. So what is there for me to write? And that filled me with a lot of confusion, and actually that gave me the clarity that this book is about confusion. So when you ask me, sorry, just tell me the...
I said that when you're so certain, when you know, when these divisions become victim and...
Yeah. So I think, I know I'm going to be repeating it, but I think just the realization that there are things we need to be confused about, and that this is not a simple case of victim on one side and perpetrator on the other, means that you are already, you know, wanting to look at the different layers of the reality, the different layers of the problem, different layers of the phenomenon. And for me, you know, the writing of the book is a kind of, you can say, a kind of a journey and a catharsis for the writer, that you yourself, you know, go through something and you come out with something, hopefully. So I came out certainly with a lot of despair, because it seemed to be getting worse every year, you know, rather than becoming more and more redundant and more irrelevant. It seemed to be gaining in relevance, gaining in its, whatever it stood for. So that certainly filled me with despair. But what I think came to me as a source of strength was that my faith in some of the things that people like me stood for, which is what Daddu stood for, that only became stronger. And I felt that no, that indeed we do want that. We may have gone about it in the wrong way. Maybe we need to strengthen our movement, but we certainly do want that. And that, so our aim, we're not wrong in the aim we have. We want dignity for all. We want everybody to have the freedom to choose various facets of their lifestyle. So I think, so that faith that I found at the end of the book actually made me feel stronger, even while I felt a lot of despair about the growing relevance of the book. After so many years, I mean, it was very disturbing, you know, when after it almost, I think it's 10 years since it was written in Hindi, and Daisy was translating it in English, and I was corresponding with her. And I was feeling very, very disturbed at the fact that, you know, we didn't seem to be talking about a book which belongs to the past. We were talking very much about something which is today.
And all the stuff that you've written about it, which she wrote in 1998, is actually, I think one of the most disturbing part of the book is that you're reading it as fiction, but it's actually, you're living it as reality.
I mean, it was almost like a prophecy.
It was almost like a prophecy.
Except for the lynching, which the book doesn't mention, you know. There's certain things which have started now, which doesn't come into the book. But everything else, you know, seems to be like the fears which are founded, you know. I mean, so it was very disturbing.
You said that. You said I'd never. You said it is scary how right it was.
Yeah.
So, but on this note of hope, we're going to still hold on to hope and hold on to Daddu's hope in a way. And I think in some ways the book is also about hope. The fact that you have this book, the fact that it has this ability to still rattle you, the fact that you can never walk away, you can never shut this book and then sort of let it lie on your bookshelf and just let it lie. I think in some ways it will keep your conscience alive. It is, I will say, go out and get it. I mean, I think it's about reclaiming your...
You're holding another book.
Oh, sorry, I'm so sorry. I thought I was reading that.
You can go and get that one as well.
You should also get that also, but this is the book too. But yes, I'm so sorry. I thought I was reading that. Okay. So 5 minutes, and I think, can we open it up for questions? Is there a question? There's a gentleman right at the back, and there's a lady. Oh, and there's a lady here. So I'm going to give... I'm this thing, so all the ladies first, but the gentleman who in front, at the back there, yes.
Thank you for that. My question is, how does this feeling of otherness arise? Sorry. Is it insecurity, a feeling of dominance, or what it is? What is it?
Well, I suppose it could be different things, but certainly othering gives a kind of sense of false sense of security and comfort, and it becomes an easy way of thinking that your problem is, it's not your problem, it's somebody else's problem. You are just suffering that. So, I mean, look at anything. I mean, surely, I mean, even in very intimate personal relationships, you'll find, I mean, we like to shift the blame entirely to the other party. But, I'm just thinking of, in the last few years, I've been going to many places in the world. And in the West, for instance, I mean, sorry, all the Western friends sitting here, but that's the example that's coming to me at the moment. How easily anything that I talk about becomes a problem of the East, whether it's patriarchy, whether it is something to do with women, whether it is something to do with class and, divisions of other kinds. Too easily, it's introduced and the conversation is carried forward like it is about things which are happening in the East and the West does not have them. And again, I have to say, look, let's, look at it as like a problem which is on many sides. And we have all to deal with the different specifics, but it's a common problem. So I think there is this false sense of comfort in shifting it all to the other. And the other, I think there's another role the other can play. I mean, the other is also magic. The other is fascinating. And, think of theater, think of films where becoming the other allows you to enter another skin and really enjoy another life. But I think when we are talking of the things we are talking about, the other becomes the repository of the problems, while we've become the clean ones. So, yeah.
There was a lady here with a cap, I think peach cap. Oh, it was, sorry. Okay.
One last question.
No, there are two quick questions.
Hello everyone, great session. Ma'am, I read your book and I find that each character is deeply layered, but Sharad's character really struck out to me. So what was the inspiration behind his character and how did you build upon it?
Well, it just, I didn't have a formula, so it's not easy for me to say, I put a bit of this and I put a bit of that and shook the dabba and the character came out. So it's not quite like that, but yes, I mean, I think as a writer, perhaps others do too, I certainly follow the ordinary, what is called ordinary. So I follow the daily life and the ordinary of the characters, and that bit by bit, begin to show whole personality. And that is how Sharad showed himself. Yeah.
Hello. Yeah.
Two more sand, mother, Amma.
Sorry, I'm kind of nervous, but I wanted to ask you, you just said right now that as a writer, you live in a world of fiction. And every now and then, you have to get back in the ground and touch the reality. So, how hard is this? And do you like living in the world of fiction more than the world of reality? And if you could choose, which would you choose?
I didn't say that I just live in the world of fiction. I said, that the world of fiction has a different scale of time and place, It doesn't belong just to the immediate, while my daily life belongs to the immediate. So as a writer, I would like to be given that quiet and retreat, to be in that longer span of time and space. But today's world, where the immediate is so pressing, where the immediate is so urgent, where the immediate is so overpowering and important and every moment, changing my life. I'm not able to ignore it. So I live in this tension. But certainly as a writer, I would like to have that time to be a fiction writer. Yeah.
Thank you. That's it. I think we've wrapped up. Okay, thank you.